Hello YouTube viewers, welcome to my channel Science to Technology. In today's show, Rocket Monday, we're going to talk about Crew Dragon Demo 2 or DM2. So let's dive right into it. Well, this is a commercial mission, so you have to understand the foundation that laid this whole thing before because this idea that a commercial company will send astronauts was unheard of. So what happened that this events transpired? So to say, well, you have to understand NASA built Saturn V, greatest rocket of any time, so till this day. Now, it was amazing, but it was ludicrously expensive. So the idea was created that let's make something that is far more practical, because the reality of the situation was that more often than not, low Earth orbit is the next big spot because they were building international space stations. So like, okay, we only need to go to basically low Earth orbit. So why not build something that is only goes that far but is reusable? So that created space shuttle. So the idea with space shuttle is supposed to be very quick turnaround. The main aim was they should be able to basically do two launches per month. Reality was they managed to only do two launches per year. Is supposed to be cheaper, ended up costing basically more than Saturn V, and I mean like per launch wise. So it was ludicrously overpriced, and on top of that, these two things will not bother a country. It's like, yeah bro, we can handle with this is government program after all. However, it had a Challenger disaster, which was the first one. It happened in 1986. Now, in almost all rocket system that was built till this point had a crew escape system. Basically, no matter what happens to the rocket, crew can be evacuated safely. Space shuttle was the only system that had no such system. So basically, if something goes boom, crew is toast, and that happened. 7 people lost their life. It is as real as it gets. On top of that, when this happened, they're like, okay, we thought this will be absolutely safe, but it's not. So lot of effort was put into it to make sure that shuttle is absolutely foolproof. No matter what happens, no disaster could happen. Then another disaster happened, which is Columbia 2003. Now at this point, people are like, okay, first time we are like, we are still figuring things out. Second time it was like unacceptable, because they basically doubled the money that was went into like refurbishing and maintaining the system, and they checked every last detail to make sure that it's a damn safe, and why the hell it keep going boom. So at 2003 a commission was created. It's like, figure this out, and the reality was horrifying. It's like space shuttle was inherently bad. They could not salvage it. No amount of basically trying to fix things will not do. No amount of refurbishment, no amount of repackaged basically schedules, checklist, all that, none of that will do anything, because inherently the design was flawed. So it forced USA in a scenario where they had to retire space shuttle prematurely. What does that mean? That inherently means they had to end it before they had a replacement plan for it. Now, space shuttle itself was planned like around the tail end of Saturn V. So it's kind of normal for like, our mission is working, then company will start to company in this scenario would be NASA. They will be like, okay, what will we do after this? This happens. It takes time, so there is always a bit of overlap. But in case of space shuttle, it was like done abruptly, and that abruptly caused a scenario where they had a lot of chaos. Before space shuttle was retired, there was multiple projects in the works, one of which was X-36 and S-33 or X-36, depending on the name you want to understand. That failed. Venture Star system, that failed. Okay, then they started to reuse the parts from space shuttle. That first project was created, that was Artemis program. That they actually made a demo out of it. Actual rocket was launched, they like a demo mission was done, and it was scrapped. Then taking basically whatever was successfully done with a demo mission, they took that components and they redesigned what we call now SLS. So you can understand that NASA basically lost a space shuttle. The replacement was replaced mid replacement, and the reality was basically NASA got stuck in a position where they had to basically take their astronauts, send it to basically Russia, and was like, bro, can you please launch them to our own space station? So reality was very serious, because loss of life is not something that anybody takes lightly, because again, astronauts are more expensive than rockets. So even in a like, oh, I only care about money, yeah, these people are not cheap. So, and not to mention, they take years and sometimes decades of experience to make. So it's not something that you're like, oops, it's not a fighter jet. It's something much more serious than that. So NASA needed a new tool, new way of thinking to solve this crisis, because it was very big gut punch. So basically NASA went from, yeah, we went to the moon, to like, yeah, we can't even send a people to low Earth orbit. Let that sink in. And this is the same time China was building their basically manned spacecraft system, and they are the only country that successfully did it. So the new approach was very simple. They realized very early on, the government contracts have too much bloat, not in terms of corruption, of course, that's there, but that's like a open secret. But in terms of bloat, they realized like just to send one documentation from point A to point B, there's like, it has to change hands 17 times or something like that. So reality was very clear. We cannot do this in terms of budget wise specifically. and they were no longer in cold war, which had like open tap, like just spend as much money as you have to do, but make sure the deadline is met. They no longer had that, so they had to go to commercial approach. Now this is the time where NASA is learning a lot of things, and they realized if NASA is like, okay, we're gonna give you money, you have to build things, there is a very serious risk of exploitation. Example would be James Webb Telescope. It's like it's over budget to a point where it's like, dude, this should have been caught. The fact that it will cost around $10 billion should have been caught very early on in the project. It's like that. The fact that it cost $10 billion is not the worrying part. The worrying part is that nobody realized that it will cost $10 billion. It should have been super easy, super obvious, very early on. Like as in, like once they actually started to figure out this is the final design, we're gonna build it. That point should be the time where it's like, dude, this is gonna cost much more. Than it happens. Like sometimes you actually start to build it, it's like, oh no, it's gonna cost more. Okay, fair enough. But to make sure this exploitation never happens again, they created a very unique funding program. Basically, you will ask how much money you need. We're gonna give you 50% of that. So basically, you say, hey, my project is gonna require, let's say, $400 million. You're like, okay, cool, we're gonna give you 200 million, and here's the condition applied: you will only get $200 million if you can show that you have that another $200 million. So it's not like, okay, we're gonna do half work. No, you have to show that total $400 million is there in your bank account. So many companies were rejected flat out, because even if government agreed, basically NASA agreed, it's like, bro, take the money and do something, and they failed to match the private side of it. They're like, yep, cancel, project cancel. So this time NASA did that to make sure that no matter what happens, they will not get exploited same way as other commercial military projects and all that jazz. So this was one fail safe to make sure the money does not, like open tap does not happen. Another aspect was because of the lot of hodgepodge happened that in the space shuttle, which included Department of Defense trolling NASA. Basically, they're like, let's make the shuttle bay this big, and they never used it. Basically, the shuttle bay is much bigger than it's supposed to be, and again, it was done for spy satellites, but they never launched it. So the reality was they got trolled, and that again made the shuttlecraft much more expensive than it had to be. Basically, NASA's project of shuttle was use this to build ISS. They could have made it much smaller, and making it even 10% smaller would have costed a lot less. So to push it to its maximum limit, which was required because of Department of Defense, really costed them a lot. So this time they're like, dude, this is our goal. Basically, for example, take 7 ton to ISS in a year. That's it. How you do it, that's up to you. Basically, you can do even 1 ton per launch and do 7 launch in a year. You can do in 2 launches, or you can do in 1 launches. I don't give a damn. That is the final goal. Take 7 ton to Earth orbit to ISS. That's it, and it must be done in a year. So you cannot be like, okay, next year. No, it has to be. That's the time frame. That's the payload mass. Do it. And the payment wise, basically that's the goal. This is what you have to do. How the heck you gonna get the payment is no longer like, okay, this is the open tap. They will pay in terms of milestone. Basically, you have to say to NASA, it's like, bro, okay, we're gonna do an engine test, and if engine test shows promise, like, I guess people know it's a rocket engine and it has a tendency to go boom, so they expect that they will compensate for that. But you have to show, like, okay, by 2021, basically, for example, we'll have basically rocket that does stage separation safely and reliably, and we'll show that in orbit. You must do that, or be so close to be like NASA is like, yeah, we can keep continue giving them money, so they can actually do that. So NASA will no longer be like, yeah, just take the money and take a project that's supposed to cost $2 billion and spend $10 billion on it. That's no longer an option. So milestone makes sure that they know, even if a company can match that 50%, they cannot exploit NASA. So these things allowed NASA much more flexibility. And because of the harsh experience from basically going from a leading space provider to a country that literally is behind China, practically before this launch, China and Russia was the only people who can launch people to space. Let that sink in. So they realized they need redundancy. Now, redundancy does not mean having 2 or 3 of the same rocket. Redundancy means having different systems. So realizing this, they realized they will no longer be like, okay, one people have to do something. That is why Boeing is also in the race, and SpaceX also is in the race. They learned this the hard way. So if, let's say, SpaceX goes boom, Boeing will keep going on. If Boeing goes boom, Boeing will be grounded. This way, they will make sure that no matter what happens, they will always have one active system, no matter what. And if things go properly, by 2025, they will have 3 launch system, 3 human rated system ready to go at any moment in time. And no matter what happens, one at least should be working. So this approach changed everything. That's why the whole idea of commercial mission started to come into the forefront. Now let's talk about SpaceX. SpaceX at that point, where I'm talking early 2000, it's a basically small startup from nowhere, and this is the whole company. Yes, and that's excludes these four people. So reality was these are not big people, and they did not had experience where like ULA can come to NASA and it's like, bro, we have 30 years experience. Not IBM can come for computer systems like, bro, we have Saturn 5 experience. No, they have nothing, almost nothing. And the reality was, you can see interviews from Elon Musk back then, 2002 and all that, and he was flat out saying is like, anybody who's actually skilled enough in rocket building, they do not want to work for us. Flat out, because like even if you are willing to pay them, because he did had $100 million of his own fortune, that is why investing into this, they are like, dude, I will waste my time here. So for that reason, and not to mention rocket engineers are not something like, yeah, LinkedIn rocket engineer and all that, yeah, it's not that common. So he was stuck in a position where he's like, dude, I'm gonna have to do everything myself, and they paid a price for that. Basically, they had to build one rocket, which was Falcon 1. Basically, it had one engine in first stage, that's why it's Falcon 1, and that's why Falcon 9 is called Falcon 9, because it had 9 engine in first stage. So they had to build Falcon 1, and they had to launch it, and after that NASA would be like, yeah, okay, we can see you have actual potential, so next stage of money will be allotted to you. So they launched it. Boom, bad things happen. Okay, they launched it again. Boom, again happened. And sometimes they realized, okay, because they were launching from a seaside, they forgot to take into consideration that basically salty air can corrode almost anything. And you have to understand, any actual rocket engineer who actually has actual experience, they will be like, they would have solved it from day one. But they had to learn this the hard way, and they launched the third mission. Again failure. Then they had to do this the fourth time, and that time they succeeded. After that, after Falcon 1's fourth successful launch, NASA is like, okay, they have a lot of promise, they have a lot of potential, and actual low Earth orbit successfully achieved. And that point is like, okay, we're gonna give you the money. And Falcon 1 was supposed to be stage 1. They're supposed to have a stage 2, which was Falcon 5, which will have 5 inches. They bypassed it. SpaceX is like, yeah, we are wasting money because we have to have Falcon 9 in order to do that 7-ton to low Earth orbit to ISS. So they bypassed Falcon 5. That's why Falcon 5 designs are on the air, but no longer actually built. So this is from SpaceX. Now let's talk about the actual launch. Now launch was very quote unquote tedious. Why? Because it was a very long path. If you are following SpaceX, you must have realized SpaceX became the first company to actually do private docking to ISS in 2011. Now 2011 is a very interesting year because that is the year when USA lost its wing, so to say. USA was basically grounded after 8 July 2011. That was the last space shuttle mission. So from that point on, like SpaceX was been successfully built from 2002. In 2011, they actually docked with ISS. So you can understand that they are brick by brick, they are laying the foundation. And it's not like, okay, in 2020, they just send astronauts there. There's like, they had a cruise escape system. They stored in-up flight abort system. They actually did the testing of the basically the Dragon capsule itself, docking with ISS, so can be damn sure that it's gonna work. So it's a very boring kind of scenario, because again, it's supposed to work, it did work. That's the whole point of it. But it was a very long process. Basically, you can see how SpaceX, like how much SpaceX struggled to reach to that point where they are docking with ISS. And even in docking, you can see, like if you are following all the missions, like they will not dock, they will berth. Berthing means our robotic arm, Canada arm specifically, will grab a SpaceX probe and then dock it with themselves, because they did not trust the computers. Again, that's not discrimination. That's how you're supposed to do it. That's like, this is your first mission. Let's be safe here. Let's like you do not want to rack multi-trillion-dollar space station. It's better to rack basically space probe. So that's the reality of it. They built it brick by brick. If you're watching the history, the launch was surprisingly boring. Now this is the reality of it. SpaceX did something that was unheard of. They had a rocket that freaking comes back and lands like flat out. If you take Saturn 5, that is the most amazing rocket, is just a beefed up ICBM. It's like you take ICBM, it's like scale it up. It's most amazing rocket in terms of power, but in terms of what it does, it's not that magical. This puppy, that's basically Falcon, it comes back and lands just like, bro. And you might be like, let's say you are cynical and you're like, hey dude, they can only use maximum 7 or 8 times. Again, compared to every other rocket, that's one. Every other rocket is best case scenario is 1. So even if you only reuse it one another time, that you reduce cost by 50%, flat out. So the reality is this whole company is running on Elon Musk. in the early years, you can see that like, they did not had any another dude. So how the heck he is doing that? Well, simple answer: passion. Now there are many countries, including India, that have space agency and very big funding compared to what he had. A lot of funding, so to say. But why the heck other countries and space agencies? It's not like, okay, Europe, as in like the whole of Europe does not have any rocket that compares to this. So how the heck that happened? Simply because of passion. He gets out of bed, he's like, bro, I need to go to Mars. That's it. He does not give a damn. It's like, okay, it's gonna cost too much, or it's like unattainable, which NASA said specifically, because again they did moon mission, they realized how much it's gonna cost. He's like, okay, if it's too expensive for NASA, I will figure out how to make it cheaper, and I'm gonna do it. So the reality of it, he's passion driven to a point where it's like it does come with a side effect that his mouth is very emotional, so to say, like timelines wise. But he's passionate beyond hell. Like basically he's a embodiment of NASA when NASA was in its infancy. Basically when NASA was scared to death in during Cold War era, when they were building a Saturn V rocket in 8 years. Let that sink in 8 years they built from nothing. They had no idea. The first launches, basically after Sputnik, the first launches they were doing, the Vanguard launches, they were not successful. So they had nothing, from nothing to Saturn V, and they could not even build a replacement of space shuttle with using the same damn parts. Like SLS still is not complete. How the heck that happened? Because they lost their competitor. USSR is no longer there. The competition is gone. They no longer have the like fire under their ass. This guy has it. Like from day one, he's like, I need to go to Mars. Like I don't give a damn how much it's gonna cost, or like is whether it's practical or not. It's like I have to do this. So everything he builds, that's why Falcon 5 was ditched. This like they would it would have allowed them to like conquer a little bit of a basically small sat market, but they're like that's just more roadblocks, more management overhead that he had to handle. It's like, bro, remove that. It's not necessary. Falcon 9 is necessary because Falcon 9 specifically leads to Falcon Heavy, which can directly allows you to send basically at least the foundation of Mars colony. So everything this guy does is focused on one thing: go get humans as to Mars. Another aspect, his approach to doing things is much different. It's much different because again, he is an entrepreneur. He is a millionaire of his own making. He has a simple approach: take risk, take even bigger risk afterwards. And you can see that in his motto. It's like failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. Very simple motto. It's like it inherently means they are going to the roots, so to say. It's like, dude, try it. We do not know how things work. How would you know? And the epiphany, so to say, he had during basically flight returning from Russia, when they rejected his mission of like sending basically he wanted to buy a old rocket system to send greenhouse to Mars. When that was rejected during a return flight, and he's like reading rocket book, is like, bro, they are all using 1970s technology. So that realization, that's why he is so passionate about innovation. It's like, dude, don't get stuck into the reality where it's like, we are a space company, we are doing this and all that, we have been doing this from 90s. No, that's anti Elon Musk. Elon Musk is like, dude, you've been doing the same thing from like past 5 years. Yeah, change it now until it breaks. It broke. Why did it broke? Can you fix it? Can you make it better, or is it the upper limit? And you can see that in Falcon 9 itself. Falcon 9 first stage, it does not even look like Falcon 9 because again it is shorter and it was only capable of sending 10 tons. At that time they were trying to use parachutes to recover the stage one. Again, did not work, but that's the whole point. They were trying that. They were trying to do things that nobody thought possible, and then tada, we are here. Basically, this guy single-handedly became responsible to giving USA its wings back. So it literally, like the amount of money, even if you were saying like, okay, NASA gave him $400 million or something like that. Again, there are companies, there are space agencies which has that kind of budget, would be like chump change. That would be like, yeah, we consume that kind of money in 1 year. And I'm talking about almost every national space agency. So that's the whole point of passion. Like he brute forced it his way. It's like, bro, I'm gonna do this, and that's it. Like again, his I do not like his mouth, but basically he keeps yammering on. I'm gonna do it in 4 years. I'm pretty sure in NASA would literally have a discussion. It's like, when he's saying Elon Musk is doing 2024, make it 2026. Again, the original target date was for crew mission was 2018. It was delayed to 2019 because of the first rocket failure. Then it was delayed again to 2020 with second rocket failure. So things happen. But you can understand, this guy has absolute passion. Basically, he's the embodiment of what NASA used to be. So this was my presentation on this DM2 mission. Why it's so important, and why, like, when we say, like, after every storm there is a silver lining. This is the reality of it. Space shuttle's failure allowed us to create a scenario where USA can, by 2025, could have as much as 3 independent launch systems with independent rockets. So they can be damn sure no matter what happens, they will never be grounded again. So this was my presentation on DM2. I hope you liked it, learned from it. In that case, please click the like button, share it amongst your friends. That will help me a lot. If you didn't like it, didn't enjoy it, I'd urge you to press dislike, press it twice to show me your disappointment. And please leave a comment because I try to reply to all of them. Subscribe, press the bell icon if you're free. And as always, thanks for watching.